had this doll for quite a while now. It was a beautiful porcelain doll. You know the way that most porcelain dolls look like. It was just like that. Wavy, long blonde curls, black eyes, beautiful pink and red dress with a typical headband and lace around the edges. It was a doll I received from my mother at an early age. At that age, I always thought it was such a pretty doll. A perfect look. My grandmother had almost 50 dolls of that kind. All of them beautiful, perfect porcelain dolls. But this one in particular, the blonde with the red dress, I will always remember. Because this is the one that would be the death of me. I lived alone for quite a while. I had just gotten into college, seeing my whole life lay in front of me, and all I had to do was just go pick out what I wanted, easy as that. I was aiming for psychology, a subject I had started to respect and enjoy the last 3 years. Seeing as my mother was a nurse and my dad a therapist, it was an obvious choice for me. But moving so far away from all my friends and family wasn't as easy as I thought. Sure, my roommate was a nice person. Maybe not as chatty as I had hoped. I wasn't a person to just sit quiet in my room and never speak until I had to. I enjoyed getting out, seeing friends. But I didn't have any time or friends around. No one would talk to me unless I wanted help from my teacher in school, or my roommate had forgotten to buy milk. It was lonely, to say the least. Homework was the only thing to keep me distracted from feeling lonely. I didn't have time to try and make friends. Friends was a silly thing after all. I didn't have time to go party, maybe find somebody. It was worthless either way. My dad would skin me alive if I didn't keep my focus on the schoolwork. The only thing I had brought from home to remind me of my family was that doll. The girlish toy was displayed on my desk in front of my bed, smiling against me when I needed someone to talk to or just watch over me as I slept. It was me and that doll the whole time. That fucking ugly doll. As time went on, I started to pull myself more and more away from any human contact. The schoolwork was getting over my head, and the regret of going here began filling my head. But I couldn't quit now and go home, not after my parents had paid everything for my college and car to get here. I just had to stay and make the best out of it. I really tried hard, but with each day the hatred of other people took hold of me, and I would need hours alone, just sitting in my room to cool off. It was getting harder to get out each day. My roommate despised me, I could tell, but I didn't blame her. I was acting like a jerk. I refused to take my share of the daily chores, wiping the floors, taking out the trash. But I couldn't do it. I was being pulled into a dark hole. And with the loneliness came the paranoia. At first I accepted being lonely, but it reached a point where I started to realize my dumb behavior. Tried to reach out to people, to tell them I wasn't feeling alright. There was only stress, and nobody had time to talk to a stupid college student. It was only the nerves. I hoped it was. I locked myself in my room, and I couldn't go out anymore. I had to send in to my teachers and cancel the classes day after day. But it didn't matter. They didn't send anyone in search of me. So I just kept spinning in my room, week in, week out. It was an evil circle I couldn't get out of. Then it happened. My room had been my cage. I wouldn't eat. I couldn't. It even reached that point where my roommate would come and knock on my door to see if everything was okay. But I didn't open up. I just yelled back in reply that she would go away. She did. She didn't care enough to make a second attempt. She never knocked on my door again. It was just me. Me and my doll, watching over me, and every breath I took. Then there was that night. This night, actually. It was a night that I was so used to spending alone. I didn't even bother trying to turn on the lights as I stepped up from my bed and pulled on a sweater and a pair of untied Converses before I made my way out of my room in so many days. I needed fresh air, and my window was broken. It was the middle of the night, maybe even morning. It was still dark outside, so I assumed it was still night, even though I hadn't checked the time yet. Couldn't care less. Anyway, it was a pain in the ass to come out of the room, and not wake up my stupid roommate. All I needed was to get out for a minute or two to gather some fresh air, and maybe go and buy some cigarettes. I'd promised myself to stop smoking, but lately, that was the only thing I'd been doing, smoking. I only snuck out late at night to go and get me some new cigs. It was a bad thing, I knew. But it was the only thing keeping me going, and kept me awake and safe. But that particular night, there was something strange. Someone had unlocked the gate out to the street. It hadn't happened before, and I thought the landlord held a hard hand to keep it locked at all times. I didn't bother. I just pushed the little red box out of my pocket and started smoking. The good thing about the night is that there's no one around. No one to annoy me with their stupid voices. It was quiet, maybe just a car driving by. But then, no more than that. It was peaceful. A few minutes after gaining some cold on my warm skin and some smoke inside of my lungs, I decided to go back in and maybe try to watch some television. Nothing good aired at night, but it was always worth a try. I stepped back into the building and shrugged the last bit of unwanted cold off, making myself ready to sneak back into my room. But as soon as I came to the staircase, there was something in the way. Or someone. Someone was standing in the stairs. I had to admit, it did scare me to some point, but a second later, I was back to my not give a single fuck state, and tried to walk up the stairs without confronting the person standing in the way. At first I thought it was my roommate, but the shadow of the person was too manly. Too big to be the petite roommate that I knew. I tried to pass the odd stranger, and just slightly bumped my elbow into his. He didn't move or speak. He just stood there. It was creeping me out. The scenario was too freaky. But of course, there were other students in this apartment building just waiting to scare the shit out of some other poor first-year student. But I wasn't the one to be fooled. But I didn't stop until I heard a sound. It was one of those sounds where it just caused your concentration to break shut. It was distracting, scary, unnerving. I couldn't continue on, so I just froze in position and tried to turn around to face him. At first, there was a crackling sound. The sound that had startled me. Then there was sobbing. A young man's voice, sobbing. But it wasn't human. Yeah, maybe to some degree. But the voice was pitching up, like it was breaking through a bad static television screen. I stood only a few steps away from the man in the shadow. I wanted to break away from my sudden frozen state of mind. But I couldn't. I was stuck, like my feet had been nailed to the stairs. I was trying to speak, but he spoke before I had the chance to. It was getting clearer to see now, since spending more time in the darkness helped to clear my vision up. He was wearing some kind of jacket, black, everything black, a sewn cap with strings falling out from a hole in the back, also black. His hair was torn but long, like he hadn't been able to cut it in a while, or shower. His appearance was etching inside of my mind, but his voice appeared like a dagger in my ears. When he spoke, he made another static noise, like a broken radio, but he spoke in words, tried to calm me down. But I was already too scared to bring myself to relax. I swallowed hard. The thought of somebody spying on me this entire time was filling my head like urging vomit. Feeling disgusted by this man and his voice, I just shook my head. No response. I couldn't give him a reply. I should have. Maybe it would have changed this whole situation for the better. Maybe I wouldn't have been here now, scared for my life. But I was. And I knew he knew that as well. But when I didn't give him the answer he expected, he turned to me. And his sight was one of the most terrifying yet fascinated faces I'd ever seen. He wasn't scarred or wounded in any way to make me feel uncomfortable by his appearance. But his eyes and his mouth, there was a weird glow, a golden orange glow, and it filled both of his eyes and his mouth, his teeth shining through a bright yellow light. It glowed in the dark, and it casted a light across us, on the stairs, the floor, on me, and I could see his smirk on his gray-pained face. That's when I snapped. It wasn't human. I had to get away from there. I broke through the invisible bonds and threw myself up the stairs, running up quickly as my untied shoes slammed against the wooden floor. I fled to my room without a second thought. Hopefully, my roommate that I'd been ignoring for so many weeks would hear me and call the police. I closed the door after me and locked it, my stumbling feet bringing me across the floor and into the desk, knocking my precious family doll into the floor. The porcelain broke, and I gasped in panic, trying to recollect myself and my thoughts. There was no more noise after I slammed the door of my room. No roommate coming after me. No weird glowing man on the stairwell. Just me and my broken doll, laying on the floor. I tried to scream or cry, call for any help at all. It wasn't real. I had become too crazy, insane. After spending so many months just being alone, this is what happened. I was laying on the floor, broken and shattered in pieces. I didn't know what to believe. I didn't sleep. I sat on the floor, pacing back and forth by crawling as best I could. The cigarette from before now just sat like a needle in my throat now. I was thirsty, but I couldn't move out to the kitchen to drink anything. Maybe he was there, still waiting for me to come out. I wasn't moving from my spot. I never did. But after an hour of complete silence in the room, I began to calm down and stand up to try and calm myself. There was still that feeling of being watched, and I knew the feeling too well. The feeling of being paranoid and lonely all came down to this, a breakdown. Once I remembered the doll being broken, I immediately started to patch it together. It was like the only thing I had in focus, my best friend, the doll. I managed to get a needle and thread in my room, and some glue to get the doll back to its former glory. But it wasn't easy. No matter how hard I tried, the doll would just fall back apart. It became an endless attempt of nothing. I tried again and again, but it would just fall in pieces. My only friend. I became too tired of the sudden panicking and the fixing of the doll. I just passed out on my bed. But I curled up together in a ball, the blanket over my head somehow, imagining that no monster under the bed could reach me now. All I wanted was to sleep. I didn't know he would come back. This time, it was different though. This time, I welcomed it. I was tired of running all the time, and I would rather die in my sleep than face another day being lonely again. And now, with my only friend broken, what was I supposed to do? It was tiring, the way he approached me this time. It was like I was asleep, but I could still control my body, like a lucid dream. I wouldn't dare to step into another day. Tonight, it would just end. Just like I had been afraid that it would. But I didn't care anymore. I didn't bother. I just wanted to have a long sleep and never wake up again. Never face the loneliness again. He came back to me, with his hands guiding me up from my bed. He wrapped his mind around mine as I tried to see, but the only thing I could still see was his gray hands holding mine tight. Suddenly, there was a sensation I wasn't sure I could feel. Floating. Like a puppet, he cut 2 open cuts on my wrists, but it wasn't across. It was from the center of my arm and down. He reached for something. Muscles. Something to peel out and hang on to. The bad thing was, I allowed him to do it. My struggle had become too much to bear, and with the long pieces of muscle hanging out of the cuts in my wrist, he started to pull at them. He pulled at them like he wanted to control my body and arms. How it all came together in reaction to my nerve system and skeleton. He knew how it worked. Yet there was no pain. No pain that filled my heart or body. Just another piece of my mind, staying at ease again. It was a wonderful feeling. It was like nothing else mattered. And as he continued to cut me open, he began singing. I could see him clearer. The man who I just hated with all my might, I now welcomed to finish off my endless suffering. Maybe it had been he who had forced me into this thinking. Maybe he was the one to blame for everything I had done to myself. Was this all in my head? Or was it real? It took me only a minute to lose every sense of my touch. My nerve system had been crushed under the hand of this man, this thing breaking every bone in my body. I could feel he was twisting my ribs and twisting my hip bones, all for it to make it easier for him to turn me into what he saw me fitting to be. It was like the long pieces of torn muscles were strings, controlling my limbs, my head flailing from side to side. All I could see was his smile. So I smiled back. The last feeling I could feel was his hand tugging hard around my neck. Then, snap. At first, I was afraid to see death approaching me this way. I had never thought of it this way. I would have said no and refused if I could have decided it all on my own. But I didn't. I said yes. With a broken neck, death was just half a second away. Then there was nothing but a golden smile and his warm hands holding my strings up as my body fell. Early the other morning, my roommate found me, dead. I had committed suicide by hanging myself from the ceiling fan, assuring my death. I had jumped from the bed. Beside me was that doll. The broken porcelain doll with the red dress and the lovely blonde hair. You may be wondering how I'm writing this to you right now, or how I found my way to contact you. I found it necessary to write down my story before I passed on. This is my legacy. This is what I'm leaving behind. I couldn't stand the loneliness anymore. I couldn't stand facing the problems on my own. It took so long. Too long. Dear Mom and Dad, I'm so sorry.